Hello and good afternoon, everybody who is joining me on this Easter Saturday. I know there's no such thing officially as Easter Saturday. We kind of go from Good Friday to Easter Sunday, and I think Easter Monday. But we all know it's the Saturday between those days, so we'll call it Easter Saturday today. Happy Easter for those of you that celebrate, or happy Ashtaroth, or happy, what was the other names for that deity? Oh, sorry, Christians, you probably let's just leave out happy Easter. May the decorated eggs and fertility and the blessings of fertility be with ye, followers of Christ. Sorry. Yeah, happy Easter, everybody. I hope you've all been having some nice time off with your families, etc. I've been editing feverishly. I literally just dropped a new kind of like documentary thing. It was like a video essay. I've been planning, by the way, those of you who have seen it, put a 1 in the chat if you've seen it, or leave a little comment. It's about Killmonger. So it's like my Killmonger piece. I've been planning to do this for like a long time, since I started this channel, which was like a couple years ago. Even though I didn't do anything for ages on this channel, I've always wanted to do this Killmonger piece, because I've always had it in my head, put it that way, and now I've done it. So it's kind of one of those things that I want to tick off. I've done it. What did you think, Capo? You said you watched it. Appreciate you. Tell me what you thought. So yeah, I've done that piece now, and I'm really happy that I've said what I wanted to say. I don't know if it will resonate with people. I don't know if people will find it offensive. I don't know if people will agree with me, but I actually don't care. I just I just wanted to say that about the film, and I think I feel that, and I think it every time I see Killmonger as a character. I'm always like, oh, fallen soldier. God bless you in the afterlife, Killmonger. I don't know, it's really silly, but I feel like I'll do more of those if it's well received, if people kind of enjoyed the experience. I might do a few more of those kind of just opinion pieces, I think is the best way to describe them. Now, that aside, you ever come here to hear me wax lyrical about my other videos, although I would advise you to watch it if you haven't seen it. Thank you, Capo, who said it's very nuanced. I appreciate that. I actually think I show a strong bias towards Killmonger, so I appreciate the fact that you fed back to me that it was like it was quite nuanced. So that's great. That's lovely to hear that. Yeah, so anyway, where was I? If you're going to watch that, I mean, if you're on here and you haven't watched it, please watch it. I would argue, from my biased point of view, it's a good piece of content, and it'll be worth the time that you invest in it. That aside, now let's get on to this guy we've got on the screen, who I have not avoided. Let me tell you why I haven't done a video about Franck Zanu up until now. I was actually hoping to interview him. I want to get him on the channel, and what I didn't want to do is scare him off. And once the fact of the matter is, once I decide to do a piece on someone, you guys know that I'm very honest. I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think of them, and my view is unapologetically sided towards the Black worldview, the pro-African, pan-African, pan-Blackian, whatever you want to call it. Well, that's my worldview. And when people oppose that, particularly unfairly, I'm going to dress them down. I'm going to embarrass them. So I thought, let me not do a piece about him, because I might be able to get him on the channel. I might be able to blindside him, get him on the channel, and then when I actually get in front of him and I'm interviewing him, then I can take him to task. So I was hopeful that that would be the case. And I did actually message him before the Christmas break, and it sounded possible that I might be able to get him on the channel. So I was kind of holding back, and it's kind of gone ghost city a little bit now. And I could follow up again, but I just wanted to check out his channel. So before I sent another message chasing up and saying, hey, let's do an interview, because I think it would be quite a good, essentially, I don't think he's faced anyone who has challenged him effectively, which I find very, very disappointing. I honestly do find it very disappointing. I'm very disappointed in some of the intellects that who have been in front of him and who have allowed him to spout absolute nonsense, like absolute crap. He just, for some reason, I don't know what it is, he just does this does this hoodoo, and all of a sudden these people who I, rate and who I deem as, quite intellectually capable, just like turn to jelly in front of him, and they can't debunk him and they can't refute him, which I don't understand why. So anyway, I held back in the hope that I was going to get him on the channel, but then I was checking through his content again before re-engaging him again, and his content was just getting me so angry. I was just like, I don't even care if I get him on the channel at this point. Literally, I don't care. I'm just gonna, I think I've decided that I'm going to make a sport out of destroying black sellouts. I've just decided it. I think this channel is going to start leaning more and more into this anti-black content. Yeah, black anti-black content makers, the BABs, let's call them, the Babs. Yeah, I'm gonna start leaning into really just destroying these black anti-black content creators, because they really do make me sick. And I'm not someone who suffers from crabs in a barrel, but I've realized on this particular topic I do, there's not enough room for me and these anti-black, these black anti-blacks, these, African, a lot of them from Africa, unfortunately. Some, not all of them are though, but these anti-black and these, African self-haters, I can't share the internet with them. I've definitely got crabs in the barrel with them. It's either me or them. So I've decided it's got to be them, not me. So I'm going to destroy each and every one of them. I've already started destroying Bantu City Diaries channel. He started putting stuff into members only. And I'm not finished yet. He's going to have to put his whole channel into members only by the time I'm finished with him. And now we're going to start our run on Mr. Zanu as well, because I think he's just been getting away with absolute murder. He is absolutely diabolical. And he's really vile. And I thought I was going to get away with, I wanted to keep that level of respect, because that is a cultural thing. That is a cultural thing, just to, I hear a man speak with a, an uncle speak with a certain African accent. I'm going to be like, uncle, now let me try and persuade you my way now. But then I also feel like there's a line of respect that you don't need to cross. And if I feel like, wait a second, I'm bestowing respect onto you, but then you are showing complete disregard and disrespect on other black people, then I don't feel the need to respect you anymore. I kind of feel like, well, I'm just gonna talk to you and about you the way you talk to and about other black groups. That's kind of my perspective there. So yeah, I must start taking them down, because none of them are particularly brilliant. Most of them are just grifters, who are just, riding the wave of, ignorance, basically. So a few of you already talked to, Don Sational said, I hate this old geezer, old nasty Uncle Ruckus geezer. He really is. He's a really nasty piece of work. Yeah, he's someone's uncle. Someone needs to come and collect their uncle. That's exactly what I thought when I first read it. When I first heard him, I was like, someone just needs to come and get your uncle. What is wrong with him, man? Smelly even says there's too many of them from Nige for my liking. Yeah, he's not Nigerian, in fairness. He's from Benin, which is right next door, but he's not Nigerian. I think he's from, I'm not sure if he's Edo, but I feel like he is from an overlapping ethnicity, which is why it would make sense that you think he's Nigerian. But yeah, there's still too many of them. We got this guy here. He's not the same ethnic group as Bantu City Diaries. He's an Igbo man. And there's that girl, Moyo or something like that. Horrible, 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 horrible girl. Oh, I mean, really vile. And there's another girl. What is her name? I feel like she might be an Igbo girl as well. She's mixed race, Amala something. I don't know if you guys have heard of her. Like, there's just too many of them that are so horrible, all of them. So anyway, I'll be making time in my schedule to dive into all of them. So that's intro out of the way. Let's get underway. Enough of the preamble. With 10 minutes in, I just want to kind of like get into cooking Uncle Zanu. So we're going to start off with a little bit of an introduction. So this is, I'm just going to play this short because this is one of those long shorts, and it will give you a good insight into what his perspectives. Yes, Amala Ekpunobi, that's her name. That's her name. That name sounds Igbo to me, Ekpunobi. It's the Obi part. Most Obis I know are Igbo. Is she half Igbo? Let me know if you know where she's from. But yeah, she's another one of them. So there's just too many of them just lingering, yeah. I hope he's not Edo as well. Capo Price, I'm kind of like distantly related to the Edo people in that my father's from Ondo State, and there's definite kind of like overlap between the Edo and the Ondo people. But anyway, that's an aside. Let's like crash right into getting to know for our sins Uncle Zanu. I'm gonna let this short play, and once you can hear it, just put a 1 in the chat. If I press play and you see it moving and you can't hear anything, put a 2 so I know where we are with this. Okay, I'm going to try and let this play through and resist the urge to interrupt him, because I feel there'll be better content to come where I can interrupt him. But this is just to paint the scene as to what his views are for those of you who are not familiar. Okay, let's go.
African Americans in this country are the only groups. They have no culture. It depends on who you meet, where you meet them.
But currently there's not an African American culture?
No.
Yes, there is.
What is it? Name 2 value systems in the African American culture.
Value system?
Yes. Name 2 taboos in the African American cultural system. Name 2 traditions, by the way, in the African American cultural system. There is no value for freedom if you don't understand what it is. The concept of free. You have to have a foundation on which it would balance when you ask for it. Civil rights, they give it to you. You have no culture. Nancy, you've been here, born here. Why would you be surprised if I say African Americans don't have a culture? What, twerking? So anything
but I feel like African American culture has definitely
you say
mainstream.
No, you say the word, the African American culture. What is it? Okay, fine.
Like hip hop, not hip hop. I mean, I don't want to. Yes, I feel like
you haven't thought about it. It's fine. Don't make things up.
I'm not making it up.
Okay,
I feel
then educate me. You feel. You should know.
Guys, I just want to let you know that this is very hard for me right now. Can you see the pain that I'm feeling when people get in front of him? Now, this girl, her inability to state the things that make up African American culture is just friggin' infuriating. She actually said hip hop, like that isn't the last in a long line of musical contributions. And obviously the musical contributions is just one in a line of artistic contributions and cultural contributions, that she could have said loads and she didn't say anything. Now, I don't think she did it on purpose. This is the importance of being both socially and historically literate. And unfortunately, what I'm finding is that sociocultural and historical literacy seems to be at a premium in 2026, which is why people like this are getting away with this garbage. It's just very hard. But anyway, let it play through. I've managed to get almost halfway through without interrupting, but I just wanted you to know I'm just letting it play so everybody is put on a level playing field in regards to who this individual is.
You were born and raised here?
Yes, but I have a Haitian.
Are you African American?
I'm Haitian American.
That's correct. Do you see why you were being specific with that? Because anybody who encounters you already knows you before, if they know you are Haitian. At least 2 things comes to their mind.
What is that?
If they've been to Haiti, they can look at work ethics and they say, yes, Haitians, I know them. Service industry, they know where they do well. Food.
I feel like this guy doesn't know any Haitians. I'm sorry. I just feel like he doesn't know any Haitians. I feel like, and he gets away with a lot of this ridiculous fluff. Sorry, let me.
They can say yes, and even language, Creole.
Right.
And they can say, oh, I love Haitians, because they saw the culture in abstract before they encountered you. So people go over the bridge of your culture, your tradition, your customs, and that helps them to know how to
address it.
Exactly. To saying to you, any people who ask for these things, which are abstract, freedom, for example, independence, for example, and civil right, for example, voting right, for example, you must have a foundation on which these things are going to balance. Because the people there have to uniformly agree with consensus. This is our way of life. The do's and the don'ts involved in our culture. Even if you have to create an artificial culture.
Is that why the civil rights movement is considered dead?
It's dead and useless. They got it, but they could not balance it on any
The irony. Oh my God. I've never heard such flagrant and confident stupidity in my life. Oh my God, this is hard. Guys, I thought I was just going to play this as an intro, but I feel like I'm going to let this play through. Then we're going to debunk this crap from the start before we then go into our further content, because we have to just literally like debunk this entire video, this short, because he said so much that is just an ultimate gaslight. He's literally just saying stuff that has no grounding in anything, and we're gonna have to address it. So let me let it play through, and then we're gonna go from the start and just Dancer said breathe, brother. Oh man, this guy, I feel myself heating up literally to the touch listening to him speak.
Foundation.
So that's Zanu Project Rethink, which is his channel, and he's a nasty grifter, just like Bantu City Diaries. So now that you've had an intro to this person, I'm not gonna be insulting today. Let's just attack the arguments. Now that you've had an introduction to this person, let's now address that little speech that he has there, which was the highlight, I'm guessing, that he wanted to save, and see if it has any foundation, see if it has any credence, see if any of his arguments can be supported. So let's go from the jump.
African Americans in this country are the only groups. They have no culture.
Okay, so first of all, African Americans in this country are the only group that has no culture. First of all, that is just absolutely ridiculous. African American culture, I will say, as an African who is, not Black American, even if you want to call them African Americans, we're not going to get into nomenclatures today. So I know there's probably going to be some FBAs and some Pan Africans and some ADOS and some this and that all listening. We're not going to worry about that at the moment. Let's just pretend we know what he's talking about when he says African Americans, okay? We all know that culturally they are literally the most influential group on the planet, and that goes without saying. They have affected the language of near enough every nation on the planet. They have affected the musical listening habits of every group on the planet, every ethnicity on the planet. They have affected the arts, the dress of every people on the planet. And when you take into context their population size, 13% of the American population, their impact on global culture, is literally second to none. And when I say they are the most influential, they are the most influential by a humongous gap. One could argue that white American culture is the second most influential culture. But here's the problem with white American culture. He's sitting here saying African Americans are the only group in America with no culture. That is a gaslight. White Americans have no culture. Every single thing that is popular about white Americans, they co-opted and appropriated from Black Americans. And you can check that back. I'm not just talking about music here, but if it was to start with the music, for instance, well, oh, is it just hip hop and twerking? You fucking idiot. Respectfully, sorry. I said I wouldn't swear. I don't want to be sorry. You idiot. Respectfully. Okay, because we all know that you can go back through all of the music genres, starting with hip hop, R&B, going to country and western, rock and roll, rock, punk rock. Yeah, even in the UK, the derivative musics that black British people created, such as drum and bass and jungle, were derivatives of hip hop music. Okay, they started with a hip hop basis. Okay, going right back through all genres. And by the way, we can keep going back through to jazz and some of the classical renditions. And we can even talk about just inventions that people don't know come from Africa, like the guitar. The modern guitar is a derivative of the banjo. The banjo is a derivative of the West African kora. And this is why when the banjo was introduced to America directly from Africa. So Black Americans' effect on music permeates all modern genres. All modern genres, okay? So for him to turn around and say, oh, they have no culture, when the very white American culture or they're a very white American group that has monetized this and has created an industry around this and put a vehicle behind many of these musics, had no part in the creation of them, had zero part in the creation of them. Ask a white American what their culture is. This is the funny thing is, I was literally thinking about this the other day, and if you was to look at it on the surface, people who have no history in the background of what we taught regarding slavery, etc., will look at it and they would believe that white Americans were the enslaved group. If we weren't looking economically, I was going to say culturally. Because if you look, the whole kind of like, the whole hallmark of, oh, I come from a slave heritage, the whole hallmark of that should be, I have no cultural inheritance. Whereas that is not a problem amongst Black Americans. Black Americans have culture and heritage in terms of their food, in terms of their music, in terms of the way they've customized their language, in terms of their dress. Everything they do is self-sustaining. They literally could be cut off and separated from white American culture and they would survive perfectly. Whereas if you look at the reverse, white American culture doesn't have any of this. White American culture is almost like, and they have no connection to Europe because they always like to ping on about their European ancestors. But if you look at white American culture, it doesn't have any connections to Europe. If you meet the average white American, you ask them, where are you from ancestrally? Less of them know where they're from normally than Black Americans, which doesn't make any sense because they don't have a history of slavery. So why do you have this complete and utter disconnect to your European heritage? Where does that come from? They don't know where they're from. They don't have any expression of their European heritage or culture. And everything they practice in the United States, they've stolen. And this is even going into things like, you know, country and Western. Oh, we got the country and yeah, you stole that too. Oh, well, what about cowboys and cowboys? You stole that too. Yeah, even the only thing that you could say was like quintessentially Americans, the whole cowboy culture, well, they stole that from Black Americans too. There's literally nothing that they do that they created. Everything they do, they stole from Black Americans. So you've got this group that came from Europe that has no connection to Europe, and their very culture they practice, they've co-opted from the group that they released from slavery. It's an interesting tale, isn't it? But that's obviously not a discussion that Mr. Zanu would be willing to have, because according to him, Black Americans don't have any culture. Black Americans don't have any culture, yet everybody is practicing their culture as they speak. I think one of the things about Mr. Zanu, where I have to give him props, because I almost like to pull up, it's very easy to pull up, you know, racists like Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk or whoever it is, because, you know, inevitably, in the time that they're insulting Black people, they're going to do something Black inadvertently because they're so directly affected. You know, they're going to use some AAVE slang, or they're going to be dressed in a certain way. They're going to carry themselves in a certain way. They're going to do something where you can go, aha, well, if you don't like Black people, stop doing that like Black people. The one respect I can give Mr. Zanu is he's very careful. He doesn't ever drift into blackness. He keeps that well separated. Like he's very good at that. Because at this point is the normally point where I'd say, well, look at him wearing his, but he does very well there. So Mr. Zanu, I'll give you kudos in that I can't accuse you of, you know, practicing Black American culture. You seem to really do your best to emulate white Americans from top to bottom. So yeah, kudos to you on that one. But there you go. Let's carry on, see what else he says here that we're gonna destroy.
It depends on who you meet, where you meet them.
But currently there's not an African American culture?
No.
Yes, there is.
What is it?
The freeze in there just gets to me. Why is it? What do Black Americans do that is not their own? You know, that's the easiest question, okay? Because the harder question to ask is, what do white Americans do that they've invented, that's just theirs? They don't do anything that's their own, okay? Everything they do is essentially co-opted from their Black American counterparts. Literally everything they do. Black Americans, on the other hand, everything they do is their own culture. She's sitting there wearing a hairstyle that she very likely has got done in a Black American salon. Now, I'm not saying they invented that hairstyle, but I'm sure they've put their own Black American spin on that hairstyle. I'm just going to assume that that's the case. I could be wrong, okay? I'm sure her wardrobe is full of fashions that she styles like a Black American woman. I'm sure that she's enjoying Black American products. Like, there's so many things that she could have said here. Even, you know, taking into account music, the fact that she thinks that Black people only invented hip hop, I find just like, how little of world history, or, you know, do you know? How little do you know? There's no music. Guys, let me give you a very, very quick shortcut when it comes to music. Any music you hear with percussion is Black in origin. Okay, because percussion is literally an African invention. So any music you hear of percussion is Black in origin. And that includes all of the Asian musics with drums and this, that, and the other. All of their drums came from Africa. Yeah. The origin point of all percussion-based music is Africa. And that's not even going on to the origin of guitar, and most string-based music is Africa. So it's just one of these things where the gaslight of telling Black people they have no culture is just, it's honestly laughable. It's literally ridiculous.
Name 2 value systems in the African American culture.
Value system?
Yes.
And this is a straw man. So now what you'll find with Mr. Zanu is he doesn't define a lot of the stuff that he says. So he throws things out at people, and then he deliberately will say something that he knows that the person he's talking to isn't expecting and will find difficult to answer without having time to process it. So now he's thrown out to name 2 value systems. Now, value systems don't define culture. Culture is defined by many different things. So the first thing that I would do is say, can you define what you mean by culture, so we can make sure that we're working from the same definition. But anyway, he says throw out 2 value systems. And this is an easy one for me just as a Black person, because I know globally Black people have a lot of shared value systems. Okay, we have a lot of shared value systems. So one of them will be, it's, you know, a cultural taboo to be rude to your mother. Okay, and this is not something that crosses all cultures. It's one of the things that we laugh about as Black people, is how rude white kids are to their mum when we're growing up. You know what I mean? We'll go to our white friend's house and like, shut up, mum. You know what I mean? You'll just sit there like, what the hell? What's going on? I remember my best friend, mixed race dude, and he used to be so rude to his dad, man. I literally used to be like, what is going on? His dad would come in and be like, shut up, man. Close the door, you dickhead. And I'd be like, what the heck am I seeing? So this is just one of the shared cultural aspects that you'll find in the African American community. You'll find it in African communities. You'll find it in Jamaican, whatever it is. We all share this. It's not difficult, okay? So that's a cultural value system that you have, or we have shared, okay? We have like so many value systems as different Black groups, but then specifically as African Americans, of course, they have cultural value systems. Now, I'm not going to speak on them, but I know for a fact that families from, you know, the North, whether from the North or from the South, will have different, you know, expectations, different value systems, differences in terms of how people are introduced, differences in regards to the cookout. In fact, one of the biggest value systems you see practiced in Black Americans that actually we don't really see practiced in other diaspora groups so much is you do the whole massive family reunions. You know, that's a huge thing. And then you have these, you know, these massive like family barbecues, and people will just be invited from like, you know, all over. You know, this is the such and such family, you know, this is the Johnson's family reunion, or this, that. That's a huge, like that's a massive cultural value system. It's something that I would love to do, by the way, but it's not something that we practice. Okay, we have parties and stuff, but that whole kind of idea of a huge family reunion, getting people from all sides and then bring, that's massive, you know. So the idea of culture in the African American system and value systems, there is loads. You know, you just have to have a meaningful conversation with someone who actually sees and values their own culture to be able to bring that out. This woman is a Haitian American. I think it's a bit unfair to ask her this, and so I'm not going to trash her too much in her inability to respond. But she could have, having lived in America her whole life, I feel like she could have, you know, answered this a little bit better. But fair enough, maybe she's not a debater or someone who is that quick on her feet when it comes to responding to this kind of barrage of irrelevant questions that he's throwing out.
Name 2 taboos in the African American cultural system. Name 2 traditions.
Taboos. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like, so he's boiling culture down to taboos, traditions, and you know, mythical value systems. Okay, so what he's doing here is he knows that African Americans have a cultural strength when it comes to the arts, when it comes to music, when it comes to fashion, when it comes to global impact, even when it comes to kind of the modification of language. He knows that they have a disproportionate impact on global society. So what he's doing is he's avoiding those, okay, and he's going for things that are quite abstract. You know, name 2 taboos. If you was to just fire back to a similar question, well, why don't you give me 2 taboos in Iceland, or give me 2 taboos in France? He wouldn't be able to answer you, because no one ever defines the strength of their culture by name and taboos. Now, obviously, you could name many taboos. How one is, don't bring a white girl home. You know, that's not. Once again, taboos aren't universal. You're never going to get a taboo that's universal across the entire culture, but it's still a cultural taboo. You know, that's still a thing. Don't bring one to the hood or whatever. Like, it's like, this is just basic things. But once again, he'll never sit there and acknowledge these things. Someone said, yeah, you know, kiddie fiddling. Yeah, that's a definite cultural taboo. Yeah, in the Black community. Yeah. That's a definite cultural taboo. Yeah, something that we don't do. But
by the way, in the African American cultural system, there is no value for freedom if you don't understand what it is.
That's God. There's no value for freedom if you don't understand what it is. Well, who would better understand freedom, given what we're told about history, than the African American community or the Black American community? Who better would understand freedom? So the question once again I'd ask is, what's your evidence for saying that they don't understand what freedom is? Do you understand what freedom is? Because what you're about to say later will prove that he doesn't understand what freedom is. But let's carry on.
The concept of free, you have to have a foundation on which it would balance when you ask for it. Civil right, they give it to you. You have.
Now, if you can listen to the depths of the deplorable nature of what he's just said there, guys, because I think you can watch this, but it might go ahead. And by the way, if you're enjoying it, please do like the stream so people can find it. Feel free to show appreciation through super chats. Point out, you can just that essentially, if you don't clear definition outside of free, you don't deserve to have civil rights. You don't deserve to be free. That's what he's actually saying here. Can you imagine that? That's literally what he's saying. He's saying, well, it's your responsibility to know exactly what you're going to do once you're free. Otherwise, you don't deserve to be free. That's literally what he's saying. Don't believe me, I'm going to bring that back so you can listen to what he's actually said here. Okay? It's shocking.
Why, when people go to Jamaica, they only show the touristy part?
African Americans in this country are the only groups. They have no culture.
Value system?
Yes. Name 2 taboos in the African American culture system. Name 2 traditions, by the way, in the African American culture system. There is no value for freedom if you don't understand what it is.
Why, when people go to Jamaica, they only show the touristy part?
African Americans.
Okay, well, let's quickly see that for. He said there's no value for freedom if you don't understand what it is. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I never knew that you needed to have a value for freedom to be afforded it. That's interesting. Then we need to redefine slavery, don't we? Because he's saying unless you have a value for freedom, then you don't deserve it. That's literally what he's saying. He's saying, well, if you don't have a value, you're never going to appreciate it, so you don't deserve it. You might as well be enslaved. I'm sorry, it's not for you to make that determination, sir. First of all, what you're saying is a gaslight, because clearly people have an understanding for freedom because they fought for it, which is the reason you're sitting down on the sofa in America with your black skin, you dumbass. You wouldn't be sitting in America with your black skin showing if they hadn't got the civil rights that you're trying to deride them for. You wouldn't be invited, sir. You'd be in Benin. And if they hadn't fought alongside together, Pan-Africans hadn't fought alongside to, other groups as well. Cubans, I know, were involved. Russians were involved, but hadn't fought together, Africa might still be colonized and might be under imperialism. And you'd be trapped. You wouldn't have had your global job being a photographer for X, Y, and Z, whoever it was you were working for. You wouldn't have had that job. You would have been stuck where you are. And you're going to sit there talking about, well, unless you have a clear idea of what freedom is and this, that, and the other, then you're going to waste it. Like, that's not for you to determine, sir. Anyway, let's just carry on listening to what this more. And I said, in fact, before I do, let me give a shout out to Blood of the Unicorns 2621. He says, I wonder why Black Americans get so much hatred because it is the hate. Sorry, I wonder why Black Americans get so much hatred. Is it because of the influence or soft power we possess? Is it because of our association with the white America military? Which it's got nothing to do with your association with white American military, because Mr. Zanu worships white American military. So there's no way that he has that's what he's holding against Black Americans. His hatred for Black Americans is part of a grift. It's part, in my view, by the way, this is my opinion. My opinion, part of it is always going to be rooted in jealousy. They're always going to be a group of people who going to think and believe that they could have and would do better in given the opportunity that you've been given in America. Now, many of these people are not historically literate, and that's one of the key things. When you're not historically literate and you don't understand the true history of America, the true history of the Jim Crow era, the true history of life since emancipation, and the multiple times Black American communities have been deliberately deconstructed or paved over or flooded and or stolen by white American groups, and the further systemic causes of creating that financial or economic gap between white and Black America. If you're not historically literate in those things, you can be an ignorant like uncle over here. And you have to understand it comes from a lot of what you're seeing is a projection of the hatred that they have for their local leadership. And I say this as an African, okay? Africans in Africa, particularly Nigerians, I should speak for, hate their leadership. We hate them and we feel totally powerless to do anything about their corruption. They steal everything. They don't develop the nation. They're vile. They're selfish. They're everything that's wrong. And everybody in Nigeria who does well, who doesn't have a mate who's a politician, does well off the blood and sweat off their back. Literally, they have to work so hard to create something out of themselves in a nation like Nigeria, where everybody should be doing quite well if we didn't have such corrupt politicians. And a lot of that hatred they have, they project onto you because they think that Black American communities don't have to face this kind of corruption. They think the white is right. They think that white people are pure and are doing nothing, but they have no idea because they're historically illiterate. That's where a lot of it comes from. So a lot of it is grounded in the fact that they just don't understand the truth about history and the truth about what has made the world what it is to this day. But thank you very much for your $10 donation. It's much appreciated. Let's carry on listening to this ignorant man.
For freedom, if you don't understand what it is, the concept of free, you have to have a foundation on which it would balance when you ask for it. Civil right, they give it to you. You have no culture. Nancy, you've been here, born here.
So first of all, it's insulting to say civil rights was given. Civil rights wasn't given. It was fought for. Now, is there a debate to be had about how effective the granting, I should say, of civil rights has been? Of course there is, but only a historically literate person would turn around and say that is the fault of the Black community. The reason I raise this is because one of the favorite talking points you'll hear of the far right community now, so people like Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, a lot of these Black idiots as well, these Black anti-Blacks, Babs I call them, a lot of these Babs as well, they raise a similar argument. And their argument essentially is, well, Black people were better under Jim Crow than they are now. And they say that with a sense of pride. And the simple response to this is, that's an indictment of the American government and white America, not of Black Americans. Because the only difference between Jim Crow era and modern era is the fact that during the Jim Crow era, Black people had more autonomy, even though they were being hunted down and having their cities dismantled, burnt down, stolen, flooded, etc., etc. When Black people created cities in that era, they had more autonomy. They were the ones who were leading. They were running it. They had their own local kind of like local authorities, local mayoral, local institutions, local infrastructures that were built for them. Since civil rights, every Black community has come under white leadership. So the only thing that's been proven there is that when Black people transferred from being under their own leadership to the leadership of white people, they had their communities deconstructed. So how can you turn around and say, well, since you've been under our control, you haven't done very well? Because that's literally what they're saying. When they turn around, they're like, oh, well, since civil rights, you guys are doing worse. Yeah, that's because you guys are in charge and you're devils. Simple, okay? You're devils. If you weren't, if you weren't devils, then we'd be doing fine. Or Black Americans, I should say. I'm not Black American. Black Americans would be doing fine, but they're not. They're under your control. They're under every single Black town, every single Black neighborhood is under the control of a white authority, under the control of white police who routinely abuse their authority, who routinely abuse their economic position to disenfranchise the Black communities. That's the difference. So that's the reason why Black people did better under the persecution of Jim Crow and the harvesting of Black neighborhoods by poor white people who would literally go around the country, taking Black neighborhoods, taking Black real estate, stealing it from them, burning their cities down and then just taking them over. Cities that exist today that we know that their white ancestors didn't pay for, and people are still sitting there, sitting pretty in their home that grandma stole. Yeah. people are living legally in those houses, and then you want to turn around and blame the Black American community for that. Doesn't sound like it makes logical sense to me. Let's carry on.
Yeah. Why would you be surprised if I say African Americans don't have a culture? What, twerking? So anything
what, twerking? And this is the thing, even that, like, people throw out twerking like it's a massive insult. It would be an insult if all women over the world weren't doing it. Once again, even the most kind of like, let's say twerking is probably the most kind of like vulgar. That's a good word. It's the most vulgar dance that the Black American community have probably come up with in the last God knows how many years. Okay. Now, twerking, by the way, is not unique to the Black American community. Caribbean's been twerking for like that. That's literally twerking's what Caribbean's been doing for, you know, I would say hundreds of years. And in Africa, it's the same thing. Okay, go to any like that hip movement, yeah, down there, yeah, that's been a part of Black cultures. Yeah, it's a part of the rhythm that comes with percussion, is a part of the movement group. But Black Americans kind of brought started doing twerking. And what happened? Same thing that happens whenever Black Americans do anything, the whole world starts copying them. And then you're going to try and use that in a derogatory way, like every other dance move was not created by Black Americans. Like literally every other dance move. Every other dance move. Yeah. Dancing itself as a cultural practice is something that really Black people invented. Okay. Be it Black Africans, Black Americans, like we created dance. You guys didn't dance. You did this whole idea of dancing to percussion. That's something you got from Black people. And you're gonna turn around and say, oh, what, twerking? Like that's the only contribution they've made. It's absolutely ridiculous. This guy is such a gaslighter. It's unbelievable.
But I feel like African American culture has definitely
you say
mainstream.
No, you say the word, the African American culture. What is it? Okay,
like
fine.
Like hip hop.
Oh,
not hip hop. I mean, I don't want to. Yes, I feel like
you haven't thought about it. It's fine. Don't make things up.
I'm not making it up.
Okay,
I feel like.
Okay, so this is where. Sorry, come on, guys. You don't have to be in here, man. Well, so one guy, Sosa Debunking, is like, Europeans split the atom and landed on the moon. What have Africans done? Okay, so very quick question. Well, what to what benefit? Would you like to expand on how the splitting of the splitting of the atom and landing on the moon? Tell me how that's benefited mankind. Tell me how that's affected you in your day-to-day life. Tell me, have you been more impacted by mankind landing on the moon, allegedly? Yeah. Or the several forms of music created by Black American community? Have you been more impacted by the splitting of the atom? Yeah. Or clearly the fashions that have been delivered to you that you wear on a daily basis? Do you wear sneakers? I'm going to assume you're going to say yes. Okay. So already you don't understand. Like, this is weak. And this is exactly why I turned around and I was like, white Americans don't actually have any culture. You have to understand a lot of their hatred towards Black America is the fact that they actually have invented nothing. They gaslight the entire world into believing that they are creators and they are inventors. And in reality, they've invented nothing. Nothing. Everything that the rest of the world appreciates about America normally started with the Black community. So you can sit there and you can cape for the white man if you want to. That's good for you. Well done. Well done.
They educate me. You feel. You should know. You were born and raised here.
Yes, but I have a Haitian.
Are you African American?
I'm Haitian American.
That's correct. Do you see why you were being specific with that? Because anybody who encounters you already knows you before. If they know you are Haitian, at least two things comes to their mind.
What is that?
If they've been to Haiti, they can look at work ethics and they say, yes, Haitians, I know them. So
that's so ridiculous. Okay. Now, I love Haitians, and I love their history, and I love my Haitian people. But the first thing that people will think of when they meet a Haitian person is not work ethic. Okay, he's just saying that because it's convenient to his argument. The first thing they're going to think of is poverty, respectfully. Okay, they're going to think of poverty. They're going to think of, you know, massive amounts of oppression that have come, not just internally, but externally as well. The UN is a very oppressive force in Haiti. I, as someone obviously who's not Haitian but knows Haitian history, just thinks about the massive amounts of sanction and the harm that has been caused by America and France upon Haiti, as you know, in revenge for their independence, and not just their independence, their ability to compete with European nations for, you know, almost a century afterwards in various trades, including like the sugar trade and other things. Haiti was a very problematic state that they had to literally deconstruct from the ground up. But respectfully, if someone thinks of a Haitian culture, like what's the first thing, they're not going to think of, oh, these people have a really hard work ethic. They're going to think that's a nation in abject poverty. So what's the point in him trying to like gaslight and to, oh yeah, no, service industry? He's only being complimentary so he can deride the Black American community. Because if it was Haitian versus, I don't know, Indian, then he'll turn around and be like, look at Haiti, oh, look at you, you're all dirty, look at your dirty country, look at this, that, and the other. Why could you be like that? That's exactly what he would do. Do you understand what I mean? So you see how he would freely turn around and throw Haitians under the bus when it was convenient to his argument, but when he's trying to throw African American or Black Americans under the bus, he'll become very complimentary. I know exactly how guys like this think. He's not a person that takes pride in the achievement of the Haitian Revolution, in the achievement of, you know, Toussaint Louverture and, you know, the Haitian heroes who not only defeated Europe, but, you know, created a functioning nation that was outperforming the Dominican Republic, even freed the Dominican Republic, I think, for a period of time as well. So he's not aware of any of that history. He doesn't care about any of that history. All he cares about is using one group to deride another. So this is someone who is incredibly disingenuous. So, sir, chill out, calm down. Don't spam my chat because I'm being nice with you. I'll just block you. Do you not realize that I'm the administrator of my page? Like, you're not saying anything that anyone is finding hard to refute. You're very simple. Chill out and be respectful. Okay, make one comment at a time. We are sensible human beings here. This is a, you know, this is a nice space, okay, where we can just talk, you know, with a degree of civility. If you can't manage yourself and you continue to conduct yourself like an animal, I'll just block you, and it will take me 2 seconds to do. Thank you.
Service industry, they know where they do well. Food, they can say yes. And even language, Creole. Right. And they can say, oh, I love Haitians. Because they saw the culture in abstract before they encountered you. So people go over the...
And this whole thing, Creole, he's saying that like it's... Creole is essentially to French what AAVE is to English, you know? So he's acting like the fact that, you know, obviously they speak this very, you know, unique kind of pigeonized kind of like Anglo-Franc language, which is, once again, I love the fact that they have that, and I love the fact that that was developed for their culture, but he's appreciating it or its presence in one culture, but then deriding the presence of another such constructed language in another culture. So do you see, once again, the double standards here? He's just playing a game where he can appreciate it in one area and then he'll be disrespectful about it in another area. That's all he's doing here. This is just you should never, when you sit opposite someone like this, never ever take any of their compliments for a compliment, because all they're doing is they're playing a game of basically, you know, measuring one against the other, and it's a game of convenience which will change depending on who the audience is and who becomes the target or the victim of their scorn. And that's literally all he's doing here. Do you understand?
Bridge of your culture, your tradition, your customs, and that helps them to know how to
address me.
Exactly. I'm saying to you, any people who ask for these things, which are abstract, freedom.
Well, that's a stupid point. So he said the fact that you say you're Haitian, people now know how to address you from the culture that you're from. Well, you can say that about any culture. He's acting like, but obviously the whole point he wants to make here is that Black Americans are an exception with no culture. And so because they have no culture, people don't know how to deal with them, which is just absolutely nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. People will turn around and say this. No, anyone can turn around and to pick up the most negative thing about any particular culture. I being a Nigerian person, people could turn around, and by the way, this has happened to me. I've had accounts closed, by the way, because of my very Nigerian surname. All right. But people could turn around and they could make a very quick stereotype based on me saying I'm Nigerian. Shake their hand. Yes, I'm a Nigerian. They go, oh, fraudster, you're going to send me a 419 letter. You're trying to defraud me. And by the way, this is kind of like a stereotype that's been perpetuated by all groups about Nigerians, by the way. And that entire view about Nigerians being fraudulent, that was something that was cooked up between the 70s and the 80s, by the way, and perpetuated since then. But the point being that you can do that quite easily. It's not a difficult thing to do. It doesn't make your arguments clever. It doesn't make it correct. It doesn't make it the right approach to how you deal with other human beings. Do you understand?
Freedom, for example, independence, for example, and civil right, for example, voting right, for example. You must have a foundation on which these things are going to balance.
Okay. Let's carry on. Sorry. You must have a foundation of which these things are going to balance, doesn't? So this is where ignorance comes into things. Once again, we're dealing with historical literacy. You're aware of the fact that people are dealing with emancipation. So that means coming out of a situation where they essentially were, if you're going to believe the mainstream narrative, they were all enslaved. Okay. So they're coming out of that situation of enslavement. Okay. And they're moving into a period of emancipation where they have to build up their own cities and create their own things. Now, I'm not going to go into how true the mainstream narrative is and all that. But the point is, you move out of that and you move into this period of Jim Crow where they're emancipated, but they have no protection. They have no state protection. Not only that, but the state is being formulated for the very purpose of accumulating their wealth. So the skills that they've brought to build houses, build towns, build cities, the white people don't possess those skills. A lot of people miss this part of American history. The white people aren't house builders, okay? Everyone thinks about sharecropping. You don't understand that everybody that came out of that period of time with skills would have been black. So the black people are able to construct their own cities, they're able to construct their own farms, they're able to build and they're able to manage their own communities very easy. Meanwhile, the white folk don't have any of those skills. They are in desperate need of black labor, but the black people are able to produce towns, cities, societies, communities at a much more impressive and a much more productive rate than the whites, who are largely poor. So the whites, rather than creating their own communities and working with that disadvantage, create military systems, create violence, create pitchforks and torches, and decide we're just going to take what doesn't belong to us. If we see a nice town that's next door, we're going to take it. If we see a nice this, we're going to take it. If we see a nice piece of land, we're going to take it and we're going to lynch the owner. That's what that entire period of time was about. It was about the accumulation of black developed towns and cities and communities and moving that wealth from black hands into white hands. But once again, he's going to come around and say, well, if you don't have a foundation, then why should you be given emancipation? Why should you be? He's totally historically illiterate. You can't talk to, deal with, or even conversate with a person like this, because I would think that he would be unwilling to actually learn proper history, because what that would do is it would conflict with his worldview in being that the black American is a deficient human being in comparison to the white American.
Because the people there have to uniformly agree with consensus.
Dregger, sorry, I missed you. And you've given a couple of donations. So shout out to you. Thank you very much. You basically said, what's Frank's ancestry? I believe he's from Benin. Okay, so Frank is from Benin, as far as I know, from what he said.
This is our way of life. The do's and the don'ts involved in our culture. Even you have to create an artificial culture.
Is that why the civil rights movement is considered dead?
It's dead and useless. They got it, but they could not balance it on any foundation.
Okay, so there you go. That's the first video out of the way. Now I wanted to crash into another video by Frank, but that was supposed to be an intro, but I felt like we had to just like decompose that entire video because he talks a whole load of crap that just needed to be corrected. Now I want to deal with this video because in this video it's an interview of a lady called the Karen Hunter Show, who she's a nice lady. She's an African American or Black American lady. She's fairly knowledgeable, but what this video will show you a bit of is what I was talking about earlier, was the fact that people seem to freeze when they're in front of this guy. I don't know why, but it seems to have that effect where people don't respond to him. I thought she was going to completely take him to task, but I mean, like Core Earth, you said that she sat him down in this interview, but I kind of feel like she should have gone a bit, I feel like she could have hit him a bit harder. I feel like he got away with a bit too much. Maybe that's me being a bit biased, but anyway, let's give this a watch. We're going to kind of let it play through, stopping it occasionally. We're not going to do the point by point thing we were going to do, but let's see. I would like to see your feedback in terms of how you think she performs in this, and we'll see if there's any points that we can, you know, jump in and provide maybe some better responses to, or maybe he says the occasional thing that's true. Maybe Frank is not just a complete and utter nasty man. let's go through and see.
You say
mainstream.
You say the word, the African American culture. What is it? Okay,
like
fine.
Like hip hop.
Oh,
not hip hop. I mean, I don't want to. Yes, I feel like
you haven't thought about it. It's fine. Don't make things up.
I'm not making it up.
Okay,
I feel like
hit me. You feel. You should know.
Okay.
You were born and raised here.
Bring it down, Smith. Bring it down. Do you stand by that?
I like it because Karen's got the same headache that I was having earlier. That's literally how you feel. That's how I feel when I hear him speak.
Franck Zanu?
Yeah.
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will survive.
But I brought you here because of a comment you made, and I'm sure it was taken out of context. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk about it, and I want to play a clip from that interview, that discussion you had. Play it, Smith.
African Americans in this country are the only groups. They have no culture. It depends on who you meet, where you meet them.
But currently, there's not an African American culture.
No.
Yes, there is.
What is it? Name two value systems in the African American culture.
Value system?
Yes. Name two taboos in the African American culture system. Name two traditions, by the way, in the African American culture system. There is no value for freedom if you don't understand what it is. The concept of free. You have to have a foundation on which it would balance when you ask for it. Civil rights, they give it to you. You have no culture. Nancy, you've been here, born here. Why would you be surprised if I say African Americans don't have a culture? What, twerking? So anything
but I feel like African American culture has definitely
you say
mainstream.
You say the word, the African American culture. What is it? Okay, fine.
Like hip hop. Not hip hop. I mean, I don't want to. Yes, I feel like
that hip hop comment really jarred Jard Karen. She's like, so
you haven't thought about it. It's fine. Don't make things up.
I'm not making it up.
Okay,
then
educate me. You feel. You should know. Okay. You were born and raised here.
And by the way, it's a very cowardly tactic to put someone who is not only unknowledgeable but young in front of you and then bombard them like that. It's a very cowardly tactic from anyone who classifies themselves as being either an academic or commentator. Anyone can do that. This is why Charlie Kirk liked to debate college students, you know what I mean? Because he wants to put young people in front of the headlights and then hit them and try and get that. It's cowardly. It's not a way to conduct yourself, and it makes me lose respect for him, you know?
Bring it down, Smith. Bring it down. Do you stand by that, Franck Zanu?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're talking to somebody who's not African American and asking her questions. You don't have a problem with that? You don't think that was a little...
So that conversation was the Haitian conversation. So it was...
But you said African American. You brought black people in. You didn't say Haitians.
So that's already cowardly there. The fact that he said that conversation was the Haitian conversation, but we clearly see that the target of his mire for that entire diatribe was African Americans, and he's actually complimentary towards Haitians. So that's an act of cowardice that he's shown there already.
No, I'm saying the conversation I had with Nancy was Haitians can fix Haiti. It was in that conversation that this came out, and it was a soundbite on TikTok. Now, when I went to the
I mean, to say that Haitians can't fix it, was he saying Haitians can't or can? I heard Haitians can't fix Haiti, which is just insulting, because everybody with, like I said, an iota of historical literacy knows that all of Haiti's problems have been linked to the rampant sanctioning and the military occupation that has taken place in that nation. That nation has not been allowed to thrive. It's been throttled by both Europe and America, just to make an example of an independent black nation that dared to have military, success over the modern Western powers. So to say they can't build Haiti is absolutely ridiculous. Just like most nations, when America takes its foot off the neck and Europe stops funding corruption, you'll find that nations are able to turn around their fortunes very, very quickly, like we're seeing in the Sahel region currently. And what's Europe and America's response is going to be military. It's going to be invasion. It's going to be, we already know they tried to assassinate Ibrahim Traoré, a young leader with a excellent moral, barometer. They're trying to kill him. These people are barbarians. They're not good people. They're not people we should look up to. They're not people who practice what they preach or live to any kind of standards. They're barbarians. They're much more happy for nations to be plunged into situations of civil war if it means they can be rich or be enriched from those nations than they are for a nation that is developing and doing well and building for its citizenry. Not a single war of aggression by Europe or America in the history of Africa, South America, and Asia has resulted in the betterance of that nation.
The Du Bois Center in Ghana. I was a young fellow when first we went, and there was a sign on the wall, big one. I don't know, maybe a poet who wrote it, maybe Langston Hughes or something, I forgot, but they had it on the wall, and it said, the problem and the pain of slavery was not the work they make us do. It is the fact that it took away our language, our culture, our history, our traditions. And that leaves a man like a tree with no roots. And it hit me. I wrote it down in my notebook. Now, when you listen to a lot of the writings about...
And it's a fine anecdote, but you can't use an anecdote to then define how you interpret history. You can't use an anecdote to make a complete, socio-cultural, anthropological analysis of a people because you've seen this one anecdote that resonated with you. Oh, he said this. Okay, that's fine. But you're now using that quote, which was placed there, to uplift people and placed there to remind people of what's been taken from people, to use that as a stick to beat that same culture. That's a deplorable thing to do.
Slavery, the first thing you hear, even in the United States, is about how our life, our culture, our language and history was taken away from us.
And how much more impressive is it that they had all of that stripped from them, and yet they've created one of the most influential, pervasive, and, you know, globally notorious cultures that there is. They are literally impacting everything. You know, you could just look at your YouTube feed or turn on the television. You cannot, there's not a situation where you're not faced with this culture that he is trying to deride. So he's turning around on one thing and saying, oh, well, you had everything stripped from you, but then he's not acknowledging what has been done since then, because he wants to make it seem like they've been stuck in that position that they were, you know, post-emancipation, so to speak, for someone like him. They've been stuck there and they haven't moved on, and he's got to deny all the progress that they've made. He's got to act like he's never indulged in Black American culture whatsoever, just to make this point. That's someone who's desperately dishonest. That's what he is. He's a completely dishonest human being.
That is very common.
So
in
what? Okay,
music.
okay.
I met Alex Haley's.
Hold on. You're from Benin.
Yeah.
You're not there now. You're here. You're an American citizen. You came here. You left there to come here. Right.
The irony of that. I'm glad she's pointed that out. You're a Benin man. You're in America, and your access to America is directly linked to the rights that were fought for by the group that you're trying to deride. But anyway, I'm sure Karen will land.
The Homie Kingdom, we love the Black Panther and all of this, and the Dora Milaje based on the Homie Warriors and Woman King. We love that. But the Homie Kingdom, one of the ways in which your origin, your country of origin, Benin, conquered, they would sell their people into bondage to the Europeans, into this transatlantic slave trade. When you lost, you got sold. And every year, you got 333,000 pounds sterling for Black bodies to be sold into the transatlantic slave trade, which would be.
I think this was a worthwhile point making, but I don't think this should have been the focus, because this, unfortunately, what this does is it turns one ignorant buffoon and it fuels him, because this is culture wars. You have to understand, buffoons like this man, they're fueled by culture wars. They're fueled by the dislike of one Black group towards another. And so you turning around and deriding the history of the Homie, which largely is fabricated, by the way, but we'll talk about that another day. But turning around and then using kind of like the slave colluders, let's call those, the slave colluder class, those few ethnicities who they have, you know, alleged cooperation with the slave traders. There's not many of them, by the way, but those few ethnicities where they have that, using that as kind of like an answer to his ignorance, only fuels him. Because you have to understand, someone like him, his hatred for Black America is a microcosm of his hatred for Black people entirely. He hates Blackness, he hates Africanity, he hates being Black. He only, like I said, compliments one African group or one Black group to deride another. But in the face of whiteness, all Black people can get it. So that's the one thing you have to understand about the mindset of individuals like this. This type of argument actually benefits them.
Be worth about $16.7 million annually, every single year. It was Benin known as the Slave Coast because of the flourishing trade of human bodies. That was your protocol. That was the way in which you dominated. And it went on for more than a decade. In the 1780s to 90s, Benin sold more than 102,000 bodies into bondage. So epigenetically, one could argue, Franck Zanu, that part of your way of knowing is to sell out your people. One could argue that. Maybe that's in your epigenetics, because to me, to say something so boldly that Black people have no culture with no references, and you're talking to somebody that's not Black, you're talking to somebody who clearly wasn't educated enough, you're throwing questions at her. Give us two things.
I don't like the fact that she says they're not Black. I don't like the way Black has been co-opted for one ethnic group. I do appreciate that they're a different ethnic group and they have their own ethnicity, but Black is something that you're Black whether you like it or not. Like I was raised, I was called Black my entire life, and that wasn't for me wanting to be called Black. It's on every application form, it's on every single census, it's on every single document that I've ever encountered that has classified me, has called me Black. Every police officer that I've ever encountered has called me Black. Every teacher, every job, they've all called me Black. So turn around and say people aren't Black because they're not American, I don't like that. I appreciate, and obviously you can see that I appreciate the uniqueness of the Black American ethnicity, and I appreciate the fact that it will be good to have a nomenclature that follows that group because they are unique and doesn't necessarily have to be African American. I don't even like African American as a name, but to say we are the only Black people, it's not. That's not historically literate. So I just wouldn't support that. But other than that, I'm with her. Everything she's saying so far.
There's two values. Well, I can give you 15. I'm gonna give you more, but family and integrity. And we don't really do well with sellouts. That's another Black cultural.
Shout out. We don't like sellouts. Okay. Africans, we are okay with sellouts. Let's just say that. It's not a taboo in Africa to be a sellout. 100%.
Value. But I was looking at that and I was saying, wow. And you stand by it. So you still stand by Black people have no culture?
So Benin didn't sell slaves.
They sold. I did my research. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe you don't know it.
I know.
Because it's clear to me that you don't know a lot of things, but you don't know it.
Allow me to explain what I mean, please. I really want to have a very respectful conversation. So you said Benin sold. Benin did not sell slaves because when slaves were bought from that region, there was no Benin. There was no country called Benin.
The homie.
No.
Okay. Well, whoever, it's the same landmass, correct? Same people?
No, at all.
So this is where she's a little bit off here. And like I said, it's not a big deal because I get the point that she's trying to land with. There was a Great Benin. Now, Great Benin didn't engage in the slave trade. The homie did, and there was other smaller ethnicities that surrounded the homie that did allegedly contribute to the slave trading in that region of Africa. But perhaps not the ones she's trying to. The modern state of Benin was developed around the Edo people, and there's not evidence of them being involved in the slave trade. So I get the point that he's making, and I feel like his need to kind of like he's got to jump in and correct her. The point that she's raising, he should be engaging with that because I think she's making a fair point that anyone could turn around and say, those groups that participated in the slave trade, that's a cultural flaw on their part. But he won't do that. What he'll do is he'll correct her, which is fine, fair enough, but then ignore the larger point that she's trying to bring him towards, They
have nothing in common. Please allow me. The place that became called Dahomey was at independence. The place you're calling Benin was not there. Dahomey was not there during slavery. What was there were tribes. Abomey, the women warriors you mentioned, they are not from Dahomey or from Benin. They are from only one tribe called the Agbomey tribe. That region had about 52 different, distinct tribes. Only one of them captured slaves from either the Aja, the Yoruba, the Bana, or the Nagongo areas and sold. They didn't sell their people. An example, if there is a war in, let's say, Asia or in Europe, Italians captured Portuguese or Spanish and English and sold them to the Chinese. they haven't sold their own people, even though the Caucasians who live in a region. So the slaves sold were only sold by Agbome tribe.
Right.
Way before it became Dahomey as a republic that forced 52 different tribes to come together by the French and call the place Dahomey. The people, the other 51 tribes that are now part of the country called Benin, including Agbome, they all, including my father's tribe, we hate the Agbomens because we know they capture people and they sell them. So that is the correction I want to make. So saying Benin,
right. But you're actually making my point.
And he has to accept in the description that he's just given there, he has to accept that even if it's a small contribution of the modern state, a small ethnic group or a single one, he has to accept that his state now carries the ethnicity, carries the blood, and of these people who he says he despises. And if Benin is anything like Nigeria, a lot of these ethnic groups are very fluid. People like him like to present the idea that ethnicity in Africa is rigid, you know, and these groups don't mix, and it's an absolute nonsense. Okay, the diversity seen in African genetics is seen because of the amount of intermixture. Africans in general are incredibly heterozygous, which essentially means that they have really diverse, you know, parenting, so to speak. Okay, they don't have any of that close-knit genetics that you'll see amongst kind of like inbred groups, and that's because they just, when, you know, historically it's kind of proven through the genetics that they're constantly breeding outwards, meeting new people, and then breeding into those groups. That's a very, very constant trend seen in the African cultures. So the idea that this group has come into this greater state of Benin and has remained genetically distinct, it's a nonsense, and it's not true, and he knows it's not true, because she's just made a good point at the end of the day. And she's found or picked at a flaw in the culture. Once again, I would say the kind of culture wars argument isn't one that he's going to be opposed to. He's going to be supporting of the culture wars argument, because he'll use it again one day when he's talking to a South African Boer, okay, or some ex-Rhodesian or some modern white American, to then trample his own people. He'll turn around and say, do you know that one of the ethnic groups that I belong to were slave traders? They sold their own. That is how stupid the modern African. He'll turn around and he'll do that, because this is what people like him, they thrive on, you know?
That it is that notion that somehow you are not part of, when I talk about Black culture, it is the oneness. It is the understanding that we may be something torn and new, but we are in this thing together, that got to begin with, that got to begin with. And for you to come here and to make that somehow we don't have culture because of your lack of knowledge of what culture is.
What I'm saying, as science says, when you buy slaves, the danger of buying slaves is you rob them of their culture. That is, of course, a fact.
Okay, I'm gonna bring in, because I'm very clear that I'm.
But the point is that irrespective of people being robbed of their culture, culture is something that is fluid. Culture is something that is constantly evolving. So robbing someone of their culture only happens at a point in time. There's no culture that is an exact reflection of what it was 100 years ago, let alone 200, 300, 400 years ago. Cultures are constantly evolving and changing, constantly, in every single ethnic group. Okay, you'll find a conscious. So even if you historically robbed someone of their culture, then it's up to that group, or that group will often develop a new culture. So this idea he's trying to present as though, you know, Black Americans have been static since that point of being, you know, brought into slavery, which is the argument he's made, is that they've developed nothing of their own. It's just, everyone can see that it's patently false. But one of the other arguments that he'll make is all of the contributions that Black Americans have made to American culture, he'll now grant those to the white American community. He'll say, well, that's American. But then he'll say, so anything that they've created now gets pushed over and it becomes broadly American. They can no longer classify or claim that as part of their culture. But from the discussion that we had already, you know that the group that is probably most guilty of being cultureless in America is the white Americans. White Americans, broadly speaking, are cultureless. They're cultureless. They don't have any culture. And I'm going to keep repeating this fact until people start picking up on it. They have all the hallmarks culturally of a group that was recently freed from slavery. They're taken nothing of the cultural inheritance they came from Europe, and everything that they cling on to now is a modification of something that they've appropriated from the Black American groups. So this is the issue that they have, or he has, that in trying to peddle this idea of one group being cultureless, because all he's doing, in my view, is exposing white Americans and the fact that they don't have any culture, because everything that he classifies, if someone's turned around and asked him what is white American culture, watch him squirm in his seat. He wouldn't be able to give an answer.
I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to speak on things I do not know. I'm going to invite everybody who is not a historian. If you read some things, or you went down YouTube rabbit hole, you are not an expert. You have not lived your life studying this. And I'm going to invite you to stop talking about things you don't know. But in the meantime, I'm going to
You haven't said something I don't know. That's the point. What is it I don't know? I believe
that Black people don't have culture. You believe that Black people don't have culture.
But I'm asking you to explain to me.
I'm going to actually
uprooted you from your original habitat and they took everything away from you. What is wrong to say these people's culture have been taken away from them?
Mm-hmm.
That's a different argument now. So now what you're seeing is that he's changing the position of his argument. Now he's saying something that is very obvious. Okay, the obvious point, okay, is that culture was taken away from a group of people who were enslaved. So that's the point that he's made. Okay, they had but that wasn't your initial argument. Your argument was right now, extant, presently, Black Americans have no culture. That's a completely different argument, because that's to say they've developed no culture between that point at which, you know, they were allegedly taken into slavery and now, which is absolutely falsifiable. So you're now moving your argument, now moving the goalpost to say, well, what's wrong with saying that your culture was stolen? No, don't try and change the argument. Okay, that's what he does. He's playing with semantics now, in the knowledge that is, if he presents it this way, it's very hard to refute that argument. And I hope someone pulls him up on that, by the way.
I don't understand.
Okay, well, I'm going to actually bring somebody in who knows more about this than I do, who studies Africa, who studies Black history, who teaches at Clark Atlanta. So we're going to bring in Dr. Daniel Black when we come back. Franck Zanu is here. He's made a statement before the break, and quoting W.B. Du Bois, who's he has a whole center in Ghana, in Accra. There was a quote there that you quoted, and you went on a talk show, or you were on your own show, you invited somebody on and you said Black people have no culture. And I asked you, do you stand by that? And you said yes, because of that quote. So I thought it would be great to have somebody who actually teaches this to come on and inform all of us why that is. I said you were wrong, but you know, this is your view and your view can't be wrong, but why it's not helpful. Let's say it like that. It's not.
Come on, Unc, you better. We got another Unc here now. Unc, you better cook. You better cook him. Okay, he needs to be cooked. I'm sitting here. Let's go.
Helpful. So let me welcome Professor of Africana Studies at Clark Atlanta in Atlanta, author of many books. Dr. Daniel Black is here. Hi. Your internet. Look at God. Go ahead.
Wait a minute. Yes. Brother Frank, how are you, my brother?
Doing very well. Thank you.
Good. Very good. I first want to say that I am on here to enjoy a beautiful exchange. I am not at all on here to attack or to in any way incite rebellion. You know, I certainly believe in in communication as Karen does. I certainly believe in truth like all three of us do. And, you know, we all believe in integrity. And I think it could be helpful if I can just offer this possibility.
I would just say that I think that's a mistake sometimes, being overtly respectful. I think respect is reciprocated. And I think Franck Zanu right now is in a position where he needs to earn back that respect. I think he's shown himself in public to be very deriding, very derogatory towards, you know, your origins, your culture, the things that you believe in, the things that you hold dear. And now he needs to ingratiate himself back to that community. Until he does that, I wouldn't extend an olive branch, just as me personally, because I think sometimes it's wasted on people like this.
Right. I think what could really, 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 really help this dialogue is that there's a premise here that I think is problematic, but I don't think it's yours, Mr. Frank. I think it's what people have taught in the world. And most of us have taken it because it's just what historians have said. And that premise is this: when Africans were enslaved in Africa and scattered around the world, everything, all their culture, I think you were saying this a minute ago, was stripped from them. That's the error. That's the error in this whole thing. Because a process cannot strip culture, the totality of culture, from a people. Culture sometimes is in the artifacts of what people have, but culture is also in the flesh. Anywhere a person goes, their culture goes with them. Pieces of that culture in the dance, you know, it's in the body, in the language. We brought African languages to America because we spoke African languages in Africa.
See, I'm just going to say this very briefly. I'm going to let the professor continue speaking. Me personally, I don't think there's any need for the professor or any African or Black American person to prove their cultural retention from Africa or the other parts of the world they might be from. I know that's more controversial, but I'll throw out there Europe and America. But anyway, I don't think there's any need for the Black American to prove their cultural tie to these regions or the retention of culture from those regions. Me personally, I wouldn't even make that argument. I would say, even if you want to sit here and say we were entirely stripped of our culture and we started from scratch, we have still managed in that time to build all of the fundamental, I lost my screen here for a bit, all of the fundamental foundation blocks that one would classify as being cultural. Culture is something that essentially that is handed down from generation to generation, that is important for the people that created it. It's something that's held between those people, okay? And it reflects itself in many different ways. And it's, by the way, culture, language is not really even classified as being culture, by the way. Language can impact culture. But if you look at, for instance, if I was to take the anthropological definition, there are 4 strands of anthropology. There's a physical anthropology, sociocultural anthropology, linguistic anthropology, and what's the last one? Archaeological anthropology. So you've got your 4 strands of anthropology. Now, what you'll notice there is that linguistic and sociocultural sit outside of each other. So there's that understanding that when you're studying language, you're studying something that is distinct to culture. Now, is there overlap? I'm not saying they don't overlap. Absolutely is overlap. In fact, culture is reflected in language. A lot of the time, culture is reflected in words. However, they sit on different branches of anthropology. So as a scientist, if I was studying someone's culture, I could study that in isolation, or not in isolation, but separate to the actual language. So making that argument that culture is language is totally null and void. That's disproven on a scientific level. Okay, culture can influence language and can impact language, but culture sits outside of language. Culture is, once again, behaviors, it's practices, it's arts, and it's things that are handed down from one generation to the next. And to make the argument that anyone is able to identify Black American culture the moment that you're literally in contact with it. If you're able to go, oh yeah, that's Black Americans, then that already proves that the culture exists and it's strong. There's many cultures that I couldn't identify in this world. Okay. So once again, remember, strip language aside, how many cultures are so pervasive and so strong and so distinct that without language on mute, you could recognize them? Someone could do something, someone could act a certain way, someone could move a certain way, and you could go, oh, they belong to that group. Because the number one group in the world, we can all agree, would be Black Americans. I think every single country on the planet could recognize that's a Black American, okay? Just from the way people move. Even if it was a white person acting like a Black American, you go, oh, that's Black American culture. How many other cultures could you do that for? Could you just pick out a French person? Oh, that's French culture. Not really. You might be able to if they put on a beret or something really obvious and really, really exaggerate it. You might be able to recognize it. Okay, you might be able to recognize. How many people could recognize or know the difference between a Korean and a Japanese? You know, just based on look. Some people might be able to. How many people could recognize, you know, an Indonesian person, you know, versus a Sri Lankan or this, that? Do you understand? So culture is very, very distinct from the arguments that he's making. And this is the thing, he's not going to be willing to make that argument. I wouldn't have made the argument that the professor's making here. I don't think Black Americans need to prove their connection to older African or, you know, European or American cultures. I don't think they need to. They can if they want to, but I don't think they need to. I don't think it strengthens the argument.
We were certainly denied speaking those languages after a while once we were enslaved. But those languages and the influences of those languages are still in our Black English tongues right now, right? So the premise here is that African people who were enslaved and taken from Africa lost all of Africa in the process of being enslaved. That's the error, right? Much of the culture came with us. Then through transmutation and synthesis, we revised through some force and through some voluntary actions. We revised a lot of African culture in order that it could fit the context and the circumstances and the brutality under which we lived in this diasporic place, right?
And that was an excellent point. I'm glad he's moved on now to the actual construction, the revision, the remaking and the reconstruction of a culture around their circumstance. Because the absolute lack of willingness to acknowledge the circumstance of Black Americans and to just literally attempt to lambast them for not behaving like other groups when they're placed in a situation that is globally unique is vile. It's ridiculous. It makes me very, very negative. I almost really hate this person, that another Black person could be that disregarding and that callous of a group that has done so well with so little, a group that has managed to spin so much positivity out of a ultimately like incredibly almost completely negative experience and managed to spin it into so much success that you're going to turn around there and deride them for what? Are you mad that they don't wear ashoke or something like that? Are you mad that they don't eat eba? I don't understand what Uncle is angry about. What exactly does he expect from the Black American community? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Called the Americas. So there's much culture here that came along with us, and there's much culture that we revised and gave birth to once we got here. For example, you get jazz music in America, but jazz has its roots in Africa. But the jazz itself is absolutely an American continuum, on the American continuum, on the American aesthetic continuum in terms of culture. You get gospel.
I think it would be good for him here to be making the distinction that it's Black American as well. Because when Mr. Zanu over here hears American, and with his ignorance, he probably doesn't know that Black people invented jazz. So all he's hearing is that Black people came over from Africa, yeah, and white people invented jazz. That's all Mr. Zanu can hear, because he's, like I said, he's historically illiterate, so he doesn't have the ability. So you have to build that and make explicit that bridge for him. Jazz that everyone enjoys right now, jazz that has birthed so many different forms of music, it was created by Black Americans and exclusively practiced by them for a very long period of time before them being picked up by the white community, who now also do it, and now it's being practiced globally. That comes from this group, okay? It comes from us. I think you should have made that distinction there.
Gospel music in America. You don't get gospel music in Africa. What you get now is Christian music in Africa that white Christians have taken, but gospel music is a cultural regenerative act that happened in the Americas that has certainly found its way back to Africa. Even traditions like jumping the broom, when we as enslaved people wanted to get married, we created that ritual here. African people created that ritual as a.
Can I just give a quick shout out to Macy? I don't normally do this without a donation, but I think this point needs to be driven home, and I've mentioned it already on this stream, okay? Virtually all forms of music, not just in America, popular music, yeah, is literally the child of Black Americans. Even I can give that prop to them, okay? All modern popular, like literally just open Spotify and you owe everything to Black Americans, every single genre. Even a lot of these, like I said, a lot of these Eastern genres that have infused the 4/4 beat, have infused, kick and snare, have infused, that's either coming from America or from Africa. But it's most likely America. 99% of the time it's coming from America, that influence. So I wouldn't even just restrict. Gospel is great because it's overtly Black and remote. I think what's happening here is there's a little bit of, when people have these discussions, people are very anachronistic and they look at what still sounds Black or what is still within the control of Black people. And for some reason, they're reticent to raise the historic musics that have been stolen from Black people and have since been moved into other cultures. But I think you have to be overt in making that very, very clear, because these people are adept thieves, and you've got people like this who don't hold back when it comes to their insults. So why hold back when it comes to your influence? That doesn't make any sense to me. You have to be overt with these things.
A part of African culture as a means of creating a ritualized way whereby we could signify the validity of our own marriages and relationships. But that is particularly an African American.
And by the way, yeah, I did miss that out. Shout out my Latinos and Caribbeans. Okay, once again, same story there. As I was saying, in Africa with the percussion, it's the same story. In South America, with all of those musics that people think came from elsewhere, salsa, all of those popular musics, they're all Black American. Well, I want to say, but I mean like Black Southern American musics. Yeah, that was created by the Black communities. The same thing, obviously, in the Caribbean. Caribbean still largely a Black space, but all of the music there was created by. So this kind of whole strand of music that runs through the globe has its origin, has its seat in Black communities, in the various global Black communities. So yeah, shout out to the Latinos out there as well, and the Caribbeans. I mean, London, should we really go there? I don't really think this audience, yeah, not being disrespectful, but I don't really think the audience on this channel is ready yet for that discussion. We'll be coming back to that, okay? Because I think people don't realize that Africans brought strings into Europe, and the people who composed all of those early pieces didn't look like how they think they look. But I don't think they're ready for that yet. We'll come back to that one, London. Shout out to you, by the way.
Cultural phenomenon, right? And so what I'm simply saying is I understood the premise of what you were saying, Mr. Frank, right? What most people misunderstand, though, is that we brought a culture with us, and we modified and transmuted it once we arrived in this place called America.
Thank you.
What might you say to that, sir?
They said thank you.
I thought I didn't hear.
And,
yes.
And let me just clear this up, because if you felt an ambush coming. I feel like if people have airwaves, we are in.
And that was nothing like an ambush, by the way. I think they were very, very respectful and kind in the way they presented that argument.
A space right now where there's so much division, particularly there are these culture wars going on right now between blacks and Caribbeans, and that's on purpose, because divided we are conquered. That's how we got conquered. You just told us the story of the whole area known as.
1 second, let me just pause it really quickly. Rilo, is that a thing? I never knew that. Is that? Are you just saying that, or is there some etymological truth in the Mosort? That's a thing. Let me think. Most. Yeah, that could. Oh, you got me thinking. We need to chat about that one. Let's carry on. Sorry.
Well, it was first, French West Africa, and it was divvied up, but all of Africa has been divvied up. And you said you hate these people because they sold these people, but we're all one people. And if we don't understand that, we're going to be conquered again. And if people have microphones and they're constantly out here saying these things that animate a negative vibe about Black people, it's no good. And especially when it comes out of a Black mouth, it creates the division, or it foments the division, or it seasons the division that is already brewing. For what purpose? So I really just wanted to say, what's your purpose?
When people hear things, you make individual conclusions as you hear it. It may not be why will I come from Benin Republic and be saying things? I was speaking not long ago in Boston, and I said, Benin has no culture.
See, this is where Unc is just a real tricky, and I'm not going to use a derogatory term, I told you, but this is where he's so disingenuous. So now he's moved the bar now to Benin has no culture. And I think everybody knows where he's going with this. He's going to talk about the fact that all of the nations created during the Berlin Conference aren't real, and therefore they have no cultural origin, they have no culture. This is such a logical fallacy, but I'm going to let him finish his point before I refute him. Oh, and I want to see what they say in response to it.
Now, I don't understand what at all it's offensive when people, but I was lucky that it was a monologue and it waited until a Q&A. So somebody asked me to explain. And I say, you cannot raise your child as a Beninois, but you can raise your child as an Aja tribe, a Bome tribe, with that tribe. But
and that's just a lie. Respectfully, that is just a lie. Do you know how many Igbo friends I've got who have married Yoruba women, vice versa? Do you know how many, how often that is? Orobo people, oftentimes the people from the smaller tribes will normally marry into the bigger tribes. Okay, it's very, very common. Okay, he'll sit there and say there's no Benin. That's a nonsense. Nigerian culture is very, very real. Okay, now, many people are very proud Niger. Now, it doesn't mean that you discredit your ethnic origins, your actual ethnicity. Okay, people have I'm Yoruba, I'm this, that, and the other. Yeah, that's true, but you can absolutely raise your child a Nigerian. That's absolutely a thing. Okay, people are very proud of being Niger. Okay, it's very much a thing. So for him to make the claim and to make the accusation that it's impossible to raise your child as a Beninois, that's a choice. But I know Ghanaians who are proud Ghanaian. Okay, if you go to Ghana, not everybody that you're going to bump into is going to be a Twi speaker or Ga, or you're going to bump into different people who speak different languages. Okay, you don't just interact with the ones that speak your language. Not everyone in Nigeria you're going to bump into is a Yoruba. You're going to bump into all of the people, and your common heritage or common cultural understanding is that you are Nigerian. Okay, people are this kind of ideology that he has. Okay, this is disingenuous because as an actual person from that nation, he knows what he's saying is not true, because that would take an isolationist perspective and an isolationist approach, and that is just not something you see being practiced when you actually go to these nations. People intermingle, people intermarry, people interact, trade, and they also are proud of that overriding culture that they have. So this is just nonsense that he's saying here.
Now they are calling us Benin. And if you take 5 Beninois, and people from Benin are called Beninois. If you take 5, let me use Nigeria that is more popular. If you take 5 different Nigerians to France or any outside country, and you ask them, what do you speak in Nigeria? They will start looking at each other and say, it depends on who you ask.
Right.
If you ask them, what is a Nigerian culture? They will say, it depends on who you ask. If you ask them, what do you eat in Nigeria? They will say, it depends on who you ask.
Well, this is, once again, these are just like straw man arguments, because if you could get an answer both ways. Okay, if you ask someone, what do you speak in Nigeria? Okay, someone might say, oh, we speak this, but then you might speak, people will say pidgin. Everyone speaks friggin' pidgin. Okay, pidgin goes across, it's cross-cultural in Nigeria. So this is an example of how people develop cultures or emerge. That's an emergent culture, pidgin, something that emerged from the need of all of the Nigerian people to speak in a way that they all understand. Now, obviously, I know it extends outside of Nigeria now, but the bottom line is that's an example of this emergent culture that we're talking about. So yes, people might speak Igbo or Yoruba or everywhere, or the different, all of the different ethnicities that you find in Nigeria, but also they might just say, oh, we speak pidgin. A lot of people speak pidgin. That's how you communicate in Nigeria if you want to do business. So for everything that he's saying, there's a very easy refutation for. He's ignoring the emergent cultures that have come since the Berlin Conference, because that's a real thing. Because if you talk about emergent culture and you talk about the things that are, what do people eat? Actually, most Nigerians eat the same thing. Yeah, I eat the same thing as my Igbo brethren. We don't eat distinct things. Yeah, we all like egusi. What are you talking about? Yeah. And that's not even just distinct to Nigeria. That goes, you can cross the border into Ghana, they'll still be eating the same dish. So this idea that he's trying to make that every single ethnicity has a different diet and different, it's not real. This is a lie. He's just pushing and peddling lies, but he knows that he's peddling to an audience that will be unable to refute him. Shout out Dregger. Says he's a crafty. I'm gonna have to put this on the screen because it's too funny to let out. Said he's a crafty trash panda. Yes, I think that I wanted to say the phrase that he's definitely a crafty kahuna. Yeah, let's call him a crafty kahuna. Absolutely.
If you ask a Nigerian, 5 different ones, Igbo, Yoruba, Bendelai, Calabar, Plateau, Sokoto, what is the value?
By the way, shout out Calabar Egusi. Oh, it's the best. If you want the best Calabar Egusi, bad. They got this, yeah, bad. But yeah, anyway, carry on.
Systems of Nigerians. They will say it depends on who you ask. But if you ask these same 5 questions to a Yoruba, he will give you right answers.
They won't all give you the same answer, though, and this is the problem with like his whole entire thing. Do you understand what I mean? He's oversimplifying African ethnography in order to make a point, but he's being disingenuous about it. Because you might ask those questions, you might get 2 Yoruba and 2 Igbo who give you the same answers, and 2 Yoruba and 2 Igbo who give you different answers. The guy's being entirely disingenuous. What he's trying to do is underplay the influence of Nigeria as a cultural entity, and it is a real cultural entity. He's absolutely lying.
So it means when the countries were created, the people who once had distinct culture with which they raised their children, traditions, norms, and everything, when they told them to become Nigeria or Benin or Ghana, they don't have anything at all in common. They are the Tower of Babel. And I have to educate myself that we have a problem. When I call my nieces and cousins, they cannot finish a sentence in my language completely without adding English or French. The French and English itself, they can't even speak it properly without us adding. That is a problem.
Okay, and this is now he just moved on to an entirely different point now. Once again, he's very hung up on linguistics. I said that before, and I don't think he's aware that linguistics and culture sit outside of each other in anthropology. So it's kind of like a little bit of a straw man. But the point being, he's moved on to a point now where he's talking about, oh, well, it's a problem that people can't fully speak the languages. So your initial point was that African groups, and the new nation states in Africa don't hold any culture because it's the ethnic groups that hold the culture. And now he's moved on to an argument to say, well, the ethnic groups, the culture is deteriorating because the language is being bastardized. These are like, he's all over the place here. And this is someone who the foundation for their arguments isn't strong. He should be pulled up about this, by the way.
Mm-hmm. So you can see the problems we are suffering on the continent today. It's all because in some cases like Kenya, 42 different tribes that have nothing in common with each other are forced to believe that they have a country. So I did a test in Kenya. I went to speak on the university campus. There were about 250. And I asked them, how many Kikuyus are in the room? And many students.
How is Unk getting called to speak at universities, man? I'm offended here. Why are African universities asking this guy to come and speak, man? What's going on, man? Who got this guy? Who got this guy speaking at university, man?
Students raised their hands. How many Luos? How many Maasai? And how many?
Right.
I did about 7 of the 42 tribes, and they raised their hands. And I paused for a second, and I said, how many Kenyans are in this room? And the same hands went up again. And then everybody burst out laughing. So I asked them, when you wake up in the morning, are you a Kenyan first or you are a Kikuyu first? And that became a long conversation for them to understand why corruption, nepotism, tribalism, all these things have become, and even killing each other in the same country thoughtlessly.
Mm-hmm. See, this is where he's just like he's just gone off on a tirade now. So this is a very common trait. And you would have seen this in the video where I was debunking Bantu City Diaries, who does the same thing. When you have these people who are virulently anti-black, what happens is they just start piling up and gish galloping their arguments. Do you know what I mean? It's like, can we focus here? The discussion we're having was supposed to be about African Americans, whether or not they have culture. And he's now leaped from talking about the nation states to the degradation of language to the fact that there's too many ethnicities within a single nation state. And that's now moved into kind of like, xenophobia between ethnicities that exist within a nation state. None of this is answering the question, by the way. All of this is just him dogpiling his separate reasons why black people are deficient without actually landing the point regarding culture, because he doesn't have a point regarding culture. Okay. Shout out to Macy Graham for the $2 donation. Appreciate it. They said this guy hates himself and our melanated people. He absolutely does. He absolutely does. Wait for me to hit on the second video that he does. Won't do that today, but I think we'll definitely hit on the second video he's done tomorrow or maybe another day. I don't mind spending some time deconstructing these self-haters weak arguments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what I mentioned here was because I was speaking here. Once upon a time, John Lennon sang a song and said, imagine if there is a world with no religion. There was no heaven, there was no earth. It will be a brotherhood of mankind living in love. Now imagine a world without cultures, which gives birth to these worldviews and superiority and all that. It will be a brotherhood of mankind. Now, if somebody takes a soundbite from that long conversation, which was
So now is he now arguing that cultures are a problem because they divide humanity? Do you see what I mean about the kind of just the gish galloping, just dogpiling the? Anyway, let me finish this.
An hour, and you listen to it. Then, of course, as I read the comments, and I have got many phone calls, many have said, "I think I know what you tried," because I've been saying this. Both Africans and African Americans. I do not believe at all that simply describing something, because I have seen, and I must say, if you take people from their original root. Now, whatever, everything, Dr. Black, you said, yes, it's true. People live thousands of years. Some of the things they do becomes almost like a DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to my friend in Bridgeport, who was a retired African-American police officer, and I said, I look at you. He said, take a look at me and tell me, where do you think I came from? And I said, you would fit easily as a Yoruba man. We were laughing. He said, look, I did my DNA, and I actually pointed to those areas. And I said, but he asked me, why is it then we can't get along? And I said, let me explain something which is happening in my own country. I said, Dwayne, the African-Americans you see, the Jamaicans you see, the Haitians you see, the reason they could not speak the language, continue to speak it, is because it was not one group tribe that was enslaved. If they did that, they would have continued speaking their language.
Mm-hmm.
Take a little bit of this. When they arrived here, they could not, because in Benin, when I traveled 9 miles from my birthplace.
Once again, can you see his entire argument now has shifted to just talking about language? So he started off talking about culture, being very derogatory about culture and all the lack of it. And now he's totally abandoned that argument. And his entire argument now is based on the preservation of language, which is a ridiculous thing, because like I already explained, it sits on a different branch of anthropology. Culture and linguistics are not, intertwined in that way. You can have very rich culture and not speak a native tongue. I mean, by the way, this is true of Europe, by the way. Yeah, a lot of people don't understand. There's been so much assimilation on the European continent where they've just literally took very, very complex societies and drilled them down into single tongues. Okay, you have the same even in the UK, where they all speak received pronunciation now. Before the introduction of received pronunciation, the dialects have become so diverse in the UK. People from different parts of the UK couldn't even understand each other. So you've had that same standardization of language take place, and it takes place periodically in several places where look at all of the nations that classify themselves as Arab. Look at the entirety of the Arabian Peninsula, a lot of the Levant, North Africa. Okay, North Africa has the other kind of Amazigh languages, but this assimilation towards single languages is something that you see that constantly takes place. In fact, the only part of the world where they have really archaic languages that have preserved for thousands of years, most languages spoken on this planet right now are only hundreds of years old, by the way. The only ones that are really archaic are actually the West African ones, and that's most of Africa. But West Africa is provable linguistically that they are archaic languages. A lot of languages aren't very old at all. 1,000 years if you're lucky. If you're in Europe, yeah, really no longer than 1,000 years. Most of them, couple thousand years if you move towards the Mediterranean area. Okay, these are very new languages. He's acting like languages are a very emergent thing, and languages collapse into single tongues a lot of the time. It doesn't mean that people have a total abandonment of whatever their culture was.
In my own country, I need an interpreter.
Sure.
But the African Americans or the Haitians or the Jamaicans who arrived here, because they were just pockets of different tribes with different languages, they couldn't speak. So in the case of Jamaica, they started using a little bit of their language they can remember, a little bit of French or English or Spanish, and then it became Patois.
Correct.
The same became Creole.
Correct.
Remember, the Amerigo Liberians, they took former slaves and sent them to Liberia.
Right.
So to be clear, what is his issue with that? Okay, so the fact that you have this, this kind of like created language, is that not literally the most idealistic form of an emergent culture? To be in a situation where you've got a group of people who need to communicate on a common basis, so they take the different injections of their different communities that they're bringing and they create something that everyone can understand. That's like, isn't that the apex of human creativity? Shouldn't we be celebrating that? He's trying to lambast the creation of patois as though it means that these people are cultureless. No, it means the exact opposite. It means that these people are cognizant and rich enough to create something that's unique for them in their current circumstance. And once again, another very influential culture is the Caribbean culture on the rest of the world. Caribbean culture, look how tiny the Caribbean is, and look at the impact tiny populations like Jamaica have had on the entire globe. Look how small that population is, literally minuscule, tiny island that has had this humongous impact. And he's trying to talk about it as though these people are deficient because they went through a process of, enslavement and kind of like cultural severing that cut them off from their origin. But he's not looking at the culture that has been developed since. It's very cynical and very mean-spirited what he's doing.
Back, they could not speak their languages, but they were indigenous still in Liberia. So they now have to force to speak with the indigenous. Finally, Liberia is one of the countries in Africa that has Creole, the only one in Sierra Leone.
So very possibly, it seems to me, because what you're saying, I think is right, Mr. Frank, there, right? I think that's right.
You're saying he's right, but I don't understand what his point was. Why is no one drilling him for what his actual point is? What is his point? I don't understand his point. That was just a diatribe of linguistic development amongst, and it wasn't a very accurate one, but let's just say it was, linguistic development amongst various different groups. But he hasn't talked about how that ties into his point about culture. I still don't see it.
I want to propose possibly, my elder, that perhaps the way you said it, or yes, it might have been taken maybe just out of a context, but also perhaps the way you said it, the notion that Black people in America have no culture, I think that may not have been the way you wanted to say it. Maybe we might want to say that Black people in America have a hybridized culture, right? Not that it's one culture from Africa that got transplanted here, and that one culture is clear. Because where you're right is we are the amalgamation of many different cultural and tribal groups in Africa. That is absolutely true, right? So we definitely have culture here. But what is true is it's not one example of one culture coming from Africa. So there's not a cultural continuity that was unbroken. That is absolutely true.
Yeah. I cited in that conversation, I said Haitians couldn't build. And I said, Africa stopped building. Why?
See, that's just factually incorrect. Haitians couldn't build and Africans stopped building. I want to see what this Moran has to say.
When the Yoruba spoke only one language, led by Oduduwa, which is their leader. When the Abome people spoke only one language. When the Wida spoke one. Ashanti spoke only one language, one God. They were able to build that chieftaincy to a very powerful level.
You don't bring colonization.
It's got nothing to do with them speaking a language, because the reason that's a falsifiable argument is because every one of those groups he just mentioned still speak their language. So those languages still exist. So if the point he's making is a nation state one, now they have to all operate under a single governance, okay? That's not a linguistic argument that you're making there. So why are you even bringing language into it? You're talking about ethnography. You're talking about the fact that there's maybe xenophobia, or the fact that, there's, ethnic rivalry, tribalism amongst the different groups. Okay. And that's preventing growth. Now, it's much more complex than that. Like, Karen is about to lightly go into the fact of, colonialism, imperialism, neo-imperialism. We can see the deals that are being made right now between the British, how the French are responding to, you know, the emancipation of various nations in Francophone Africa, how militarily they are responding and have done that historically over and over and over again. So we can talk about all of these things, but the point being made is that once again, you're jumping to a different point now, because now you're talking about the nation states are the problem, and that's why Black people don't build, because we have multiple different languages being spoken. But that's separate. Okay, it's not the issue there is not the languages being spoken. The issue there is the fact that you're trying to govern multiple ethnic groups under a single state, and you have outside players who are very adept at keeping nations corrupted. That's the point that you're conveniently missing out. You know, it just doesn't make any sense what he's saying.
And what the Europeans have done and the Portuguese before them and the Spaniards have done in terms of stripping people of all of the things and forcing all of what you talked about, the one language and the one culture, Christmas and all of that. You don't think that that's a source, you know, and you don't find you don't think it was insulting?
In my other videos, I explained that when people have a language, you see all the G8 countries, one of the things that is common among them, one language, and they try hard to keep it that way. I said in my videos that tribes are like the Ashanti, which is common, and you went to Ghana. These people were building quick and fast because they had only one language, which gave them one self-determination through their...
Well, maybe the fact they were building quick and fast because they weren't colonized. Sometimes I think people they don't understand. I don't think they understand, you know, the impact of actual things that occurred in history. Because he's talking as though colonization didn't happen. He's talking as though the Berlin Conference never occurred, and there was never. He's talking as though we don't have photos of little Congolese children with their hands and their feet cut off, being held by Belgian soldiers or Belgian military men, and there wasn't a genocide of 10 million Congolese in recent history that's been referenced photographically. He's talking like the actual colonization of Africa did not happen. And he's talking like someone who doesn't know what the difference was between colonized and independent Africa. He's talking like all of these things didn't occur. So when he says things like, oh, well, you know, they were building really quickly and then they suddenly stopped because language, it was not language, it was colonization. Okay, it was colonization, it was imperialism. It was because these nations were being militarily exploited. And even after many of them managed to get their independence from Western rule, there were infrastructural ties to these nations, like the Commonwealth being for all of the UK nations, to ensure that they maintained, and the Francophone nations, for instance, to ensure that they maintained a favorable economic position and held, you know, power over those governments that were left in place. And when they didn't, they would just kill the leaders, like we saw with several, you know, Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, Kwame Nkrumah, who was exiled and then murdered in exile, Toure, oh gosh, I had a brain block there, but multiple African leaders who were essentially assassinated or taken out of power. Okay, you can't just literally decide that you're not going to regard that part of history anymore and just boil it all down to, well, first of all, they had their languages and then all of a sudden they have to share languages. Now they can't build anymore. That's not history. That's not, you know, that's just a version of history that suits you. It's kind of like that's correlation, not causation. Okay, causation, everyone would agree causation was imperialism that deconstructed the African continent. Everyone would agree with that.
world vision or worldview. When the languages were put together after the scramble, and it became Chui, Ga, Adangbe, Ewe, we couldn't speak to each other. That region ceased to build. And I use the Tower of Babel as an example. I said, there is a time, according to the story, people with one language were building a tower. For me, a vertical structure means development. And God changed the language and they could not continue building.
Right.
I said,
one missing part here that I think, sir, and that is once all of these different Africans who are, and it is right, are speaking different language, get on these slave ships. One of the magical things that happens is those Africans in the belly of slave ships begin to piece together their own communication systems, but it's often as much through gestures as through words. So that once the minute we get off those slave ships, we begin building a nation, and people now call that nation America. People now call that nation Haiti. People now call that nation Brazil. We begin to build, and where you're right is because we do create a system, but the language system is not only a language of words, it's also a language of gestures, right? And that allows us to create not only buildings, but also ideas, concepts, right? As spiritual systems, etc., right? That allow us to make lives and allow us to make a headway into a cultural reality that has kept all of us alive. And one of the things I think that's important to say, we may not want to say that folks here didn't have a culture. What we might want to say is that culture was hybridized. That culture.
Okay, y'all. I feel like we're going around. Are you going to stand by this, Franck Zanu?
Karen ain't got time for this. She was like, look, we do too much, Unc. Yeah, you gotta stand by the bollocks that you just said there based on this argument. Let's see what Unc says.
When you go out, you're gonna when the clip is played and a person asks you, do you stand by that? Are you still standing by Black people have no culture? I just want to.
Yes, I will explain.
Okay, all right.
I'll give the details.
Then we can't. Then there's no more to talk about.
Yeah. We have no culture.
Yeah. No.
Karen should have cooked him though. I feel like he could have got cooked more. I feel like he got away with a lot here. I think that his stupid explanations, which made no sense, should have been brought down. Like sometimes when you're confronted with people like Franck Zanu who are bad faith and disingenuous and gish gallopers and just make arguments and just, you know, they don't have any basis for what they're saying. You just question them. That's what you do. You don't actually try and defeat them with a point. You say, okay, stop you there. How is that relevant to the point that you just made? Link the two up and make them, force them to convey their logic, and don't let them just run away with their talking, because that's what he's used to doing. And he's made a very successful career out of it, because right now he's got a channel that gets a lot of views and a lot of engagement. And just like Bantu City Diaries is full of white people going, oh, you told them, oh, they don't know, oh, it's just like they're the most self-destructive community in the world, and they think and they wonder why we don't like them. That's what his entire following says. They're disgusting. So excuse me. That's my throat gone, and I think I'm done with this video now. Let me just let it play out, and then we'll wrap up this stream.
No, that's all right. You're not going to complain. It's fine. He's going to stand by. Thank you for coming in and answering our questions today. I appreciate you. Zanu Project, Franck Zanu. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. All right.
Happy holidays to all of you.
Likewise.
I would love to host Frank on my channel. Honestly, I would love to host him. I am very much avoided in this space, I will say, and I know a lot of you on this channel will be like, you ain't got 3,000 subs. No, my other channel got 110k subs, and I try to engage people all the time, particularly in my field, and they don't want to engage because I think they know what they'll get. I would love to get Franck Zanu on the channel, and I'd love to debate much more than this topic. There's another Franck Zanu video that I do want to go through, but I did just want to share that one with you, and yeah, I'll let you see what you thought of it. But yeah, man, I hope you guys really enjoyed this, and I hope it didn't get you too frustrated. He's full of hot air. This is a guy who's just full of hot air. He's not able to defend any of the arguments that he makes. But let's see. we'll call it a day there, guys. Hit up the likes so that people are aware that this stream exists. Have a fantastic Easter for the rest of your Easter. And I've got hopefully, oh, and watch my new video, by the way, if you're on here and you haven't watched it already. I did a new video about Black Panther. It was kind of a little bit of a different approach to the videos I normally put on this channel. But I had a lot of fun making it. So give that a view, give that a like, give that a share, and have a fantastic Easter all. Take care. Peace.